Hi, I'm Jennifer Isabella.
And I'm Stephanie Valores.
Your co-host for Forrester's podcast, What It Means, where we explore the latest market dynamics impacting executives and their customers. Today, we're joined by Senior Analyst Jess Burn to discuss succession planning in the security organization. Welcome, Jess.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Jess, I feel like obviously succession planning is pretty standard, right, for executives to be doing that, planning for the future. So what is specific about security in the context of succession planning in security teams?
Well, so I think a lot of companies, to your point, do succession planning and they do it at the C level, right? Just for the C-suite. But what I noticed during the 2020 and 2021, during the pandemic, and then during what was dubbed the Great Resignation, was that security has a perennial staffing shortage, and this particular situation really exacerbated that because now people were moving around, and there were real retention issues happening. So what drove me to write this research and look into it further was just this situation where, I think right now CyberSeek, which is a collaboration between NIST and a number of other organizations, estimates we're at about 715,000 open positions in the United States alone. And I think it's ISC Squared that estimates that it's 2.7 million globally that we're down for security professionals. These are just people that don't exist right now. So the people who do exist are kind of moving around, and companies really need to retain them. So, the pros, we call it the great reshuffle on our team, actually, because security pros were able to shop around for what they believe to be the best fit. That could be pay, flexibility, the possibility for advancement, or some combination of the three. So, if their current employer was sending signals that work from home was going to be ending soon, they could easily find another role that would guarantee a remote working situation. A pay raise was a sure thing, right? So, we saw a big change last year with the U.S. Department of Defense. They completely blew up their salary bands and launched a talent management program to combat attrition because, they needed to, and it actually made them competitive with the private sector. So that's really what drove it. It was retention, and it's been really great to see interest from our clients about developing it beyond the C-suite. Some people might have just thought about the CISO, but my argument is really that succession planning should be rolled out across the entire security organization as a way to increase not only retention, but just engagement and foster mentoring, and the peaceful transfer of institutional knowledge, if you will. And it's really a great way to attract early career talent, both internally and from the outside. And that's another big topic. And I'm going to be talking about that at our forum coming up, attracting early career talent.
So this is a little bit different than what many would consider succession planning. There's succession planning because key executives leave all the time, so you don't want there to be a gap in decision making at the firm. And then there's succession planning because there's a crisis and someone's unavailable, and they're not going to be returning to work. So they have to, again, you have to have somebody take their place to make immediate executive decisions so nothing falls down. But this is a little bit different. This is about ongoing planning for loss of talent. So it's more continuous as opposed to being something episodic or event-driven kind of succession planning.
Yeah, this is about building a bench. This is about making sure that for every person who might leave due to attrition or retirement or promotion of some way, there's someone that's ready to go, waiting in the wings, that's already been trained, that has done some shadowing, that has done, some sort of job rotation, that's maybe done some upskilling through some courses or gotten some certifications. So they're ready to go and to step in. And should you actually need to scale, you also have people that are ready to move into that role if you need to add another headcount in that position. So it's really about looking at where you're vulnerable and making sure that you have people to fill those positions. Because I think a lot of companies don't understand how they've created their own single points of failure in security, where you've had somebody on the team for a really long time that has taken 2 or 3 jobs and they have all the institutional knowledge. And if that person all of a sudden is like, I'm going to get this job elsewhere, it could be months and months before you fill that role. And the people who are left to pick up the pieces do not have that institutional knowledge because they haven't been trained. They haven't even gotten close to getting the experience that that person who just walked out the door had.
Again, in security, it's different than just like what happens at the top of the food chain at the C level, or that might happen in a different part of the organization. There are some unique risks to security. Why, if somebody walks out the door, you can't just get by with somebody not in that role.
No. So a couple of the cases that I called out in the report were around some big data breaches that happened, like the Capital One breach. This is going back a couple of years, but the Wall Street Journal did an interesting report on this where they said, there were employees that were raising concerns within the company about the high turnover on the security team. And according to that article, the security team had cycled through senior leaders and staffers, and about a third of that team's employees left in 2018. And then this was a case also with Equifax. Like hackers got in and went undetected for months because of turnover in personnel and the fact that they bought all the security technology, but no one was there that actually knew how to use it because of that high turnover. So again, you're leaving yourselves extremely vulnerable if you are missing these key security roles. And again, it's not the CISO. It's oftentimes people in operations, and other areas of the security team that you really need to make sure you've got backups for.
So it's a couple things. I mean, you have to be a good security organization to manage talent and hopefully keep the retention rate high, so there isn't that turnover. But then I guess what I'm hearing you say that in terms of succession planning, that's a little bit different. That's identifying people who have been job trained in another role and overlap with individuals and can quickly step in.
Well, it's that, and it's also creating very specific development plans and actually identifying them as being part of this program. And this is also a great way to show people that, some people think the only way up, in terms of career progression is out. And that's a retention issue. So what this does, and creating a program like this specifically for security, says you have a clear path for advancement right here in this company. We want to keep you, and here's what we're going to do to invest in you. So this is a huge investment in time, absolutely, for security managers, the direct reports of the CISO and the CISO themselves. But it's also maybe an investment in funding further education and upskilling. You might want to look into a security training platform. You might want to put in for some courses and do some tuition reimbursement for different courses. This is an investment, and this is a very demonstrable investment in people's career paths and planning.
So you sold me on the why, but I'm sure, Jess, you have a little bit of guidance on how you go about doing this. So can you maybe step us through that?
In my research on this, nothing really existed specifically for security. So there's some best practices that are just from general succession planning. But I wanted to make sure that we thought about what this means for all roles. So to get started, I've been telling our CISO clients to check in with their counterparts in HR employee experience just to see if there is already a program in place, probably for senior executives, as we discussed. But maybe there's something that they can at least start with to mold their own program after. So that'll save some time. But if not, there's 6 steps that I'm suggesting that people use to move forward. So first is really to take a really good assessment of your current state. You can do this internally. You can do this through a number of different, third party type assessments. You can bring somebody in. No matter what you do, this should look at your capabilities and really give you an idea of what you've got there in your program. You should also look at the results of this assessment and line it up against corporate goals and objectives and risks, just so you know where the business is heading, to make sure that you're planning for that as well. So you should have a really good sense of the people and the process and the technology and the oversight gaps, right? And where you need to redistribute or possibly outsource responsibilities. That's also something that you can do. It doesn't have to be all in-house. And this should also uncover those single points of failure, right? So this is where the security managers should be asking themselves, all right, if the person currently in X position left, how would that affect our operations? And that's really where you can start selecting all the roles you want to include in that program. So once you have the lay of the land, that second step is to scope the program. So again, identify those critical positions, and then start creating job descriptions for those positions, because current employees in these critical roles, as we discussed, are probably cumulative. Like they probably accumulated a number of responsibilities and areas of expertise over time. But make sure that your expectations for these roles are right-sized and in line with the current market. So a good way to do that is just look at job postings for similar roles in your industry, or you can actually leverage the NIST cybersecurity workforce framework. It's great. We also happen to have, just a little plug, quite a few security role descriptions on our Forrester Decisions site that I would love for people to take a look at. And then you really need to get going and build that bench and bring people into the succession planning program. So this is where you can discuss with your managers what skills your talent pool has right now, what they need to fill those identified roles, and then create an estimated time frame for advancement. You need to know how long it's going to take somebody to actually fill the shoes of someone who's critical, that if they left, you're still not months or a year away from actually being able to fill those shoes. So you should partner with HR right now at this moment in the program as well to broker conversations, because chances are you might have identified people that you'd like to bring into the program that might be in IT, they might be in compliance, they might be in other areas of the organization. So make sure that conversations are happening with their current managers. Raytheon does a great job of this. Actually, the whole company has a succession planning program. So there are conversations happening, and managers know that people are going to be moving from position to position, and they don't consider it poaching. They actually consider it part of someone's career progression. So I think that's pretty cool. So from there, once you've identified the folks that are going to be in the program, you can have those really important development conversations. So everybody who's involved should be informed of their inclusion by their manager, or even maybe a skip level. And the key message in this conversation is that the organization is providing this employee with a path for advancement, and that's going to be aligned with their skills and potential, and that it's investing in the necessary development activities to get them ready for their next move. And then this is also the time, and I'm trying to go through these quickly, but this is also the time to stop and listen too, because I'm sure everyone is very excited to be in this program, but some may have a different career path in mind. So you might need to shift them to a different development plan. And some of them that you or your managers may have identified as future people leaders may not be interested in management, and that's fine. It's not for everyone. So the key to retaining individual contributors is to make sure that you work with them and ensure they may remain challenged, and that you can lay out a path for advancement in seniority and compensation and in other ways of responsibilities as an individual contributor, because again, those can be your single points of failure, not just managers. So once you have those conversations, quickly follow up, make sure they know that you mean what you said, and follow up with a development plan, and make sure that that's going to be part of annual reviews and monthly check-ins, or however your cadence is with these employees. And then try to make enough time for them, during normal work hours, at least a few times a week, for them to actually do some of the training in a learning platform, and then make sure they're also doing shadowing and job rotations. And if people are a little bit reluctant to give up the institutional knowledge, put it in their goals that, knowledge transfer and time spent training and mentoring is something that they're expected to do to get that institutional knowledge disseminated. And then you've got to revisit the program annually. You might want to think about putting together some metrics for that. Things like reduction in attrition, mean time to backfill, number or percentage of positions filled with internal promotions. This is good stuff. This is stuff that the C-level and the board may also be interested in. So make sure you revisit it annually and solicit feedback and adjust for any changes.
Does this, especially that upfront assessment, does this help identify flaws potentially in the organizational structure of the security team? Or maybe risks that the team wasn't even thinking of. So, that example where that individual who becomes critically important over time, they keep amassing responsibility, they keep amassing skills, but it turns out they're not sharing that knowledge with anyone. So they become this single point of failure where, like, literally, if something happened to them, the security team would be in a mess of trouble. I'm also thinking too, security teams have this notorious reputation for being toxic, which is a whole other podcast we could get into. But, in some sense, does that expose that you might have that, quote unquote, brilliant jerk who's amassed all these critical skills, hasn't shared any institutional knowledge, and maybe they've deliberately made themselves irreplaceable. How
Hmm.
do you succession plan against that individual?
That's where I think you have to put it in. You have to actually put money on it. You have to put it in their goals, right? That sometimes that's the only incentive that's going to work. And I've spoken with a lot of CISOs who've gone through an exercise and said, "Oh gosh, all roads lead to Bob," or someone like that. And Bob hasn't talked to any of our interns or anybody who's come in to do, early career roles. So um, I think the best thing to do, aside from having, we could have a whole other conversation, especially with my colleague Janan Baj about toxicity and security teams. But I think it's important to goal people on knowledge transfer and make sure that they understand that this is part of, you know, the resilience of the organization, and that it's their responsibility to share their knowledge and to delegate where they can, and make sure that people coming up have the experience and that they need to fill in should something happen.
I mean, this feels like, to your point, Steph, like this could be a lever to change the culture within security teams because of, maybe mentorship with folks younger, earlier in their career, or knowledge transfer, as we've talked about. Just that requires a different kind of mentality and working relationship with your peers or other team members, right? So this could be a very interesting tool to use in changing the culture within the team itself as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's it's also, there's a lot of culture that needs to change, I think, around hiring process as well, because you need, again, that 715,000 open jobs isn't going to be filled just by people moving around within the organization or moving up. There's a whole pipeline of people that need to come in, and there's a lot of tradition that sort of needs to be broken when it comes to the hiring process. I'm going to talk a lot about that at the SNR forum coming up in November. But things like degree requirements and certification requirements and other things need to go away. And it's security teams need to take the mentality of, just, we're going to bring someone in, we're going to grow our own. We're going to invest in them once they're here, not expect them to come to the role with all of this experience baked in. And that's a big cultural shift as well.
So, one thing that I'm interested in, and I know this has also been a part of your research, is the role of the BISO, which is the Business Information Security Officer, which often reports into the CISO. What is their role in this? And maybe start with what a BISO is a little bit more.
Yeah. So BISOs, and we wrote a role description for them. These folks act really as mini CISOs, and represent security and represent the CISO and the program with management teams, typically in different business units, and or product lines, or some area where security needs to be represented when decisions are being made. So these folks act as, translator, negotiator, therapist, security expert, ethicist, all of these different roles when it comes to deciding how to use data. What should we roll out this new rev of a product this quickly? These folks are there on the front lines to help make those decisions, and being part of the management team, it's an elevated role. The other great thing about the BISO is, and we're seeing some folks move from BISO to CISO now in a couple of instances, they really can be, if you don't have a deputy CISO, that line of succession for the CISO. They've got the business acumen experience, they've got the technical experience, they are in with a number of business units, and have made relationships with people throughout the organization, so they have some influence. So this is a natural progression when you're thinking about, if you're a CISO and you're thinking about your own successor, is to look at this role.
And to be fair, the kind of organization that's going to have this role is large and complex. It's a
Yes.
multinational company with multiple business units or product lines, or maybe they distribute security responsibility by region.
Hmm.
Or I could see a large, complex like government entity as well having this model. It's not for your typical small, medium enterprise.
No, this is where, the CISO cannot be in all places at all times, and you really need representation on a more consistent basis across big business units, in a large global organization. Yeah. So you see it in financial services, you see it in healthcare. You're starting to see it more in high tech, where people are moving quickly if it's a big tech company. And then, it's starting to roll out even to smaller, insurance carriers and some other folks that are investing in it. Because again, the influence of security is just so critical, and CISOs can't be everywhere at once.
So we've kind of gone through why you need it, how to set it up, leveraging a BSO. I guess I'm curious, like, what are some of the mistakes you've seen in companies that have started to roll this out, like that have tried succession planning?
Yeah. So in some of the conversations I had, people who have attempted to do this didn't really know where to get started and look to HR, which is great, but they sort of abdicated all of the management and responsibility and even those development conversations to HR, and it fizzled and people did not feel engaged or motivated, and it didn't really help the retention cause. So this initiative really needs to be announced by and then managed closely by the security team and its leaders. Those conversations shouldn't be had with HR. That it shouldn't just be something in your HR portal that says, go take this course. You really need to know that people are looking after you and your development in order for this to work and feel like that there's a clear path for advancement right here on the team, and that they're supported in their development every step of the way. So one of the other folks I spoke to, the CISO of Highmark Health, actually hired someone with HR background, hired somebody who understood learning and growth management, and brought that person as a direct report onto his team. And then that person developed not only the leadership development program on the security team, but also a succession planning program and just a continuous education program for all members of the security team. And he has very high retention.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we think about it, again, in a large enterprise. I mean, the security team could be huge. I know one financial services client, I mean, they have 50 people just in identity.
Yeah, there's a health plan that has 30 people just in awareness and training. That's unheard of in some companies.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I never really thought about it. It's like an organization of that size, you probably should have some dedicated HR and EX related resources embedded within the organization.
Yeah, he's one of the only people I heard of that's done that, though, and I think it's a great move.
I mean, from the sounds of it, Jess, that this is could be relatively new to many organizations, right? So is there a step before putting a plan in place that needs to happen? Like, what are considerations? Do you have the resources necessary to actually do this and do it well? Is there like a piece of advice to kind of get started here?
I think it kind of comes back to the culture of your team, right?
Mm.
Take a long, hard look at your managers and how they're currently interacting with their employees. Are they going to be able to pull this off? Are they going to be able to genuinely have these conversations with their direct reports that make them feel like, okay, I am going to stay. My next move is here. I'm going to go, I'm going to go from a SOC analyst to an incident responder, and my boss is going to help me do that. If you don't think that your management team can do that, you may want to step back and get them some training. You may want to have some hard conversations or create goals around, having development in mind when it comes to working with employees. You may also want to think about, even if you've done it in the past, going through unconscious bias training, just to make sure that when you're thinking about bringing new people into the program from other parts of the organization, or growing people up from where they are, that you're not bringing anything to the table that you don't want to be bringing. So I think you need to look at your managers first before you get started.
I was also wondering too, it's like, you conduct that assessment, that very first step. And I keep thinking in my head about that phrase, all roads lead to Bob. So, what if after that assessment, you come to a place where you look at your management team and you're like, these people do not have the leadership skills to help implement this. And we've looked at our roles and realized we have way too many single points of failure. So on the one hand, that would urge us to get this in place as quickly as possible. On the other hand, it's like you clearly don't have the leadership skills or the resources to embark on this. So maybe step one is, like you said, we've got to fix our culture first. We've got to fix our training first. We might actually need to ask for more headcount before we could even get started, because we don't even have the numbers in place to begin assigning backfills to some of these, all-purpose bobs.
That's right. Just split Bob in three. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jess. I look forward to your presentation at Security and Risk Forum as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
If you like what you heard today, be sure to check out our upcoming Security and Risk event happening live November 8th through 9th in Washington, D.C. and virtually. To learn more, visit forr.com/SR22. That's forr.com/SR22. Thanks for listening.